Hi, my name's Amber and I'm a communication major.
And I'm Akshay D'Souza, and I'm a undergrad in Science, Technology, and Society.
And we're going to talk about the Wi-Fi privacy ticker, which was created by Google researcher Sunny Consalvo.
So first, we're going to talk a little bit about digital privacy, which is our topic for this week. Digital privacy, simply put, is the ability to use the internet or any connected devices without compromising any sensitive information. Sensitive information can be anything from like your email address to your physical address, phone numbers, and it's usually subjective to the person. Some people might consider some information private, some people might not, but that's the reason why digital privacy is contextually subjective. So this could be based on someone's culture, the location, the type of information they're receiving, the usage of the information, or whether the information is, being taken from them secretively or not. So you get the idea. It's contextually subjective, essentially. And then digital privacy concerns also include transparency. So this is what we learned from the readings this week. Transparency involving the information collected means that knowing that the information is being collected and stored, knowing what information specifically is being collected and stored, and then the usage surrounding the information. So how it's being used, by whom it's being used, and for what purpose. So the Wi-Fi privacy ticker. Wi-Fi privacy ticker is a system that provides users with awareness and control over what information they expose through an open 802.11 wireless network, which is essentially um, the original Wi-Fi specification standard. So what that means is essentially while you're using a Wi-Fi, whether it's open, secure, closed, you're transferring information to and from various websites that you're using or applications. And the Wi-Fi privacy taker is a system that helps you be aware of that information, trying to reduce that issue of transparency. So how it does that is it incorporates a surface level design for the user subculture. I said that because if you guys remember from Turkle's reading on it was called The Tale of Two Aesthetics, she talked about the user subculture that came about, which is users that were cared about the surface level application of their devices they were using and not so much what happens behind it or at the machine level. So Wi-Fi privacy taker was designed for that purpose because these users usually don't know what's going on, what sort of information is being shared behind the surface level application of the stuff they're using. So it kind of tries to put that on the surface level using a glanceable display for the user. Finally, it was designed by Sunny Consolvo and her team in 2010, and it was based on findings from a study they conducted in 2009 concerning users' usage of the internet and digital privacy.
Sunny Consalvo, she is a Google researcher and she focuses mainly on research that is about usable privacy and security. And she's also an author of an article on security and privacy. Basically, she did a 4-week study that had 17 participants, and their goal was to find out how to help with digital privacy. And they were able to create the Wi Fi privacy ticker that helped people become more aware of how their personal information was being used. And this helped change people's behavior while they were using Wi Fi.
So the Wi-Fi privacy ticker is essentially a system that makes the user aware of the information that they're sharing to and from on a network and on a Wi-Fi network specifically, and it also gives them some control over what information should be shared, unencrypted at least. The reason being is because anyone within the range of an open Wi-Fi network can use free software to collect users' data that's being shared through the network, and unencrypted data too, like email addresses, passwords, etc., depending on the website that they're using or if it's a secure connection or not. The Wi-Fi privacy ticker uses, like I said, a glanceable display that sits above the taskbar, as you guys can see in the picture here. And that's where it, brings it to the surface level. That way people can see what's happening while they're using the same applications that they use regularly. So the Wi-Fi privacy ticker features a watch list and an archive. The watch list essentially is a list that the user can specify what sort of information they consider to be sensitive, and then the ticker, sorry, obviously keeps track of that information. Archive essentially keeps it stores the history of all the exposures that have occurred on the wireless networks. That way the user can go and look at the information, including information like which website, where it was sent to from, etc. The trick uses the glanceable display, of course, and it uses color coordination to show the risk level concerning certain exposures. Red's high, yellow is medium, and I think it was orange, if I'm not mistaken. That's for the mild ones. but I'm not too sure. Uh, yeah, it has a network monitor that handles all the network-related communications. What this does is essentially, if as you can see in the picture, it says it's an open network. The network monitor lets you know if it's an open network or not, and handles any communications subjected to that. But it also helps you know whether the information that you're using is being protected by the website itself or the network. Finally, the ticker has a zapper, which is a mechanism it's a control mechanism essentially. And what it does is it disconnects the user's connection to the website if any information that they said was highly sensitive is about to be exposed unencrypted.
So this was one of our first external sources, and it came from understanding Wi-Fi privacy assumptions of mobile devices. And this used a study to identify how people view digital privacy and found that most people see it as a set it and forget it problem, which was a term that they use to describe basically that after the user was done doing an action, the people in the study just sort of forgot that they shared whatever information they were sharing with others. This relates to the Wi-Fi privacy ticker because it's similar to what they found when they completed their study, and one of the reasons why they even created the Wi-Fi privacy ticker. And because the Wi-Fi privacy ticker is created if a user uses that, then it sort of helps them just realize what they're doing and what information they're sharing it from. And the quote on the screen, it comes from the study, and it basically just states just that using the Wi-Fi privacy ticker helps the participant understand what they're actually sharing with others. This was another external source, and it came from Sunny Consalvo, and it came from her research. And in this article, they focused on the development of the Wi-Fi privacy ticker. An interesting aspect of this is that it mentions the control system called the Zapper, which we talked about earlier, and it can drop the user's connections to a website if it's unencrypted. They developed the Zapper using the research in this article, and they developed it through feedback as well from the users, and they found out that many people were just simply unaware of how much information was being shared.
So yeah, taking another step back from this to Daniel Solov's readings from this week, where he talks about computer databases. He mentions the private sector's expansion of databases to include psychographic information. So essentially, he talks about how databases were initially done by the government for census requirements, and then later on, they started selling the information to the private sector. And the private sector started expanding the amount, the information, the amount of information, but also the type of information to include psychographic characteristics. What that means essentially is opinions, attitudes, beliefs, lifestyles, how likely users to click on something compared to another, and they do that by studying the users' movements while they're using websites. And another thing that increased the amount of surveillance that's done on people is the massive increase in information collected due to computers and the internet, which goes in line with what we've been studying these past few weeks. As soon as computers and the internet started coming into play, because you could store so much more information on computers, and using the internet, you could study people's psychographic movements, but also anything. For example, when websites ask you to input information like your name, address, gender, age to make accounts, for their websites to use it, or sometimes they even make you fill out a survey for additional information that they might need about you. Now, how this data is connected to the individual is through a couple of ways, including cookies, web bugs, and spyware. These also are seen as ways of secretly getting information from users based on their usage of the website. So cookies are essentially text files of codes that are deployed into the device from the web page itself to record their data when the website's visited, etc. They tag the device and not the user themselves, but that's a way of holding the information accountable to a source, which is the computer that it's being used. Web bugs are embedded in web pages and emails to gather data about people and even their personal files. And then spyware is software that's secretly installed on computers, which gathers information about all their actions online, but also private files. Data valence can lead to a loss of freedom by forcing obedience through specific methods designed by using customer profiles. That's what Solov says in his reading. And what that essentially means is that information sharing firms like DoubleClick, for example, are allowed access by websites to access these cookie files and determine what advertisements to display based on the customer profile. So you have a loss of freedom because they're designing their advertising skills based on your usage statistics, which you don't know is being used and collected for these purposes. All right. So how does that connect to digital privacy and the Wi-Fi privacy ticker specifically? So Solov says in his reading that privacy is about the concealment of sensitive information, and public disclosure of this information is considered privacy invasion. So what that means is that, in some situations, yes, information might not seem sensitive to the person that it's going out from, but the usage of that information might be considered an invasion of their privacy. So Solov claims that, to solve the issues concerning digital privacy, what we have to do is be more transparent about the information that's being shared and the ways that it's being used. So what the Wi-Fi privacy ticker does is essentially that. By doing it on the surface level, it gives you real-time information about what information is being sent, how it's being used, and well, maybe not how it's being used necessarily, but at least you have the something showing you how information is being sent and received. So it tries to help those issues, just in case you didn't know, by bringing awareness to the user. But what the privacy ticker also does through that zapper mechanism that we talked about is it prevents the sharing of highly sensitive information. It gives control to the user by preventing the unencrypted sharing of any information that the user defines as highly sensitive. So the Wi-Fi privacy ticker is very much connected with this idea of digital privacy, and it tries to negate some of the concerns.
So our class reading with Dorish and Bell talked about 3 different ways that privacy is approached in research. It looks at the economic approach that basically looked at individual benefit. And also it shows that how research tries to show how people point themselves towards a specific action and then reproduce it. And lastly, how people in the corporate world view security connection. And then how that relates to the Wi-Fi privacy ticker is that when you look at Sunny's research, you can really see how she tried to use all 3 of these approaches in order to create the Wi-Fi privacy ticker. She did want it to alert people of unencrypted problems, especially when they're in a corporate setting. And it also just allowed people to rethink their individual action, which is talked about in Dorish and Bell as well, when he talks about the 3 different approaches to even starting to create something that can help alert people of unencrypted problems.
So we thought we'd kind of also give you guys some additional resources of information that we picked up concerning, digital privacy and how you might be able to do things to help it, or what's being done since these readings to try and reduce the concerns of digital privacy. So the General Data Protection Regulation is a set of rules regarding data valence, and it was passed in April 2016. So it concerns the collection and storage of all private information on the internet, and it's specifically for European citizens, but it applies to all online businesses that are doing business with European citizens, which means that most websites that people use here in America or anywhere around the world too have to kind of abide to these rules. So it's pretty important. And what it does essentially is it requires the companies and the website owners to be more transparent about their usage of the information, like cookies, what it's being used for, provide opt-out methods and stuff along those lines. So you just might have noticed that every time you visit a new website now, you see a message similar to the one that you're seeing on the bottom over there in the picture, which says like, we're collecting cookies, and it always has like an X button or like a link to the stuff. And, websites now notify users of this cookie usage, but they still don't make it too transparent. If you read that message, you'll see that they say we'll collect information. And by clicking X, which is that X button that most people probably click after seeing a message like that, for continuing to use the website, you agree to allow cookies to be placed. Now, that not only includes cookies from the website itself, and this in this case was the Houston Press, but also third-party websites. And if you click those two blue links right there, the cookies policy and privacy policy, that's where it shows you the information that I'm about to tell you here. So, third-party cookies use essentially using tools like Google Analytics and DoubleClick, which are mentioned in Solob's reading too. Websites allow third-party companies to also collect information based off of the usage of their users on their websites, and then they use these information for their massive databases for each respective tool. And options to opt out of these aren't very transparent, as you saw. In fact, they almost make it so that they know what the user's going to click, and they try and get them to go by without even thinking about it twice. So the help pages of your browsers, each browser is specific for cookies, and you have to kind of figure out which one you're using the most. But each browser has a help page which has instructions to help you delete or refuse the usage of any cookies. Now that helps you to some extent, of course, but it also doesn't really. Well, actually, that helps you a lot. But let's just say there's some websites that you want to use cookies for, and some you don't. This web choices tool that we found, they have an opt-out page, which it runs it on your browser, and then it essentially makes note of all the websites or third-party companies that are currently tracking your usage online and storing information on your computer. And it gives you an option right there on the website itself to opt out. So it's a link that I highly recommend people using, just to give you an idea of how many companies are getting information from your usage. And let us know if it surprises you, because it definitely surprised me.
So just to sort of summarize our presentation, so Sunny created the Wi-Fi privacy ticker to serve the purpose of helping those with a false sense of security around their Wi-Fi usage. So she used a lot of different research techniques that we talked about today in order to help create the Wi-Fi privacy ticker. What we noticed about this is that there are still a lot of improvements that can be done in order to ensure everyone's data privacy. For instance, during our research, we found out that the Wi-Fi privacy ticker just really isn't necessarily that popular. There wasn't a lot of information on it.
Yeah, and then also, of course, remembering Solob's readings again, just remember that privacy is subjective to different people, and it depends on whether you consider something sensitive or not. But tools like Sunny Consolvo's Wi-Fi privacy ticker, the web choices opt-out tool, are being put in place right now to give users control over the information that's being shared. So we definitely recommend taking a look at your usage on the internet and trying to control it in some way or the other, if it matters to you, and if it doesn't, just at least knowing about it always helps and spreading the word about it.